This video, I'm going to show you how to build an AI agent that can answer any questions your staff or customers might have about a specific product. Imagine traditionally, we have a product menu for any product that a company might have. For example, in this use case, it's called the Nexus Claw platform, which is a software that a specific company will have. Now, what usually happens is that internally within the product team, they have something called the product team menu. It's specifically for the engineering team, the design team, operations teams, or the internal product team to kind of go over it and in case they have any questions about the specific product. So for example, if they have questions about the stakeholders, who they are for, what's the scope, what's the user data service, what's the analytics and temporary service, what APIs exist in there, how does the architecture diagram looks like, what are the tech stack, etc., right? Development workflow and best practices. So usually you would need an entire menu to train the staff on how to actually use this product, right? So, and it takes a lot of time, and effort for them to learn. It takes a long time for them to even look for the correct information. For example, if they're in this document and they want to look for, actually, what specific APIs exist, they have to scrape through this entire complicated document and go to their, maybe it's for content management servers, and they have to look through the individual paragraphs and look for the specific APIs. That's not only is it time consuming, but it's wasting everyone's time, because every time, imagine you have, 50 different staffs, they have to all look through the same document, but a week later, if they're asking, they probably won't remember this exact information, so they have to look it up again. So it's time consuming for everyone, and it doesn't ensure that the member of the team actually understands or grasps the knowledge, because there's a difference between reading the product menu and actually understanding what it does, right? So we're essentially providing an internal agent to train the staff. Well, how do we do that? Well, we can make use of the AI technology called RAG. So RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. And what it actually does is it actually provides a way where we can just ask the questions that we want to ask, the specific question that we want to ask to the agent, and the agent will retrieve the correct information and answers a very detailed response to the user explaining what it does, right? So imagine now we have a data preparation. So how it works on a very high level is you've got basically a bunch of different documents. In this case is this product menu, and you want to feed it into an information extraction process, which it's going to extract the core information within this document. It will then go through another process called chunking, because as you probably imagine, this is a big document, and the way that AI systems work is that you will need to chunk it down into smaller pieces. Imagine a chunk is essentially a small section, right? So you've got the introduction and purpose as one chunk, the product overview, the Nexus Core platform, as another chunk. So each section represents a different chunk. Now, it's not exactly how it works, but it's a good way to visualize it. The reason why we're doing the chunking is so that later, when the AI tries to retrieve the correct information to answer the user's question, it will retrieve the appropriate chunks. It will retrieve the chunks that is most appropriate to the user's question. If someone is asking about, who the internal stakeholders are, you wouldn't want the AI to retrieve, the API endpoints of this specific product, right? It doesn't make any sense. So that is why we do the chunking. And within the chunking, we go through something called embedding, where we essentially try to go through a process to turn it into a format from words into another format such that the AI can actually read and understand the document. Now, it will embed into a format called a vector. Now, you don't need to know what a vector is. All you need to know is a numerical format such that it provides a way for the AI system to actually read the document in a high level. Now, after embedding, it will go through a vector database. And through the vector database, it will then, the agent, right, or the customer will ask very specific questions. And the questions, again, remember, we need to do the embedding. Why? Because we need a way for the AI to understand what humans are speaking. Because systems, they don't understand English, right? It's a natural language. So we want to turn it into a vector, which is a numerical format, to actually do the vector search. So it will then look through the vector database, remember, the vector database consists of the different vector formats of the different chunks of the documents. When the user asks a question, it will then turn into a vector. Now, the thing about vector is it allows you a way to visualize how close two vectors are. Vectors, essentially, if you just imagine them, are just an arrow in a numerical space. So imagine this specific arrow here represents a specific chunk from the document, right? Let's say this vector represents the product API of this Nexus core platform. When the user asks a question, which is, for example, what are the available API endpoints, that will create an embedding that will be converted into a vector. Now, because the user asks about a specific question, which is what are the API endpoints, the vector that it converts after the embedding should be very, very close, right? Very, very similar. When I said close, it will mean literally very, very close together in this vector numerical space, right? This vector, the user's question, is very close to the original vector or the chunk, the document chunk about the product available API endpoints. Now, since those two vectors are very close to each other, it will then retrieve the relevant data that the user, actually wants to know, right? So, because these two vectors are so similar to each other, the system will actually output this specific vector, turn it into text format, right, which is the relevant data, and it will pass through a LLM, large language model, to generate a human-like text-based response to the user. So I appreciate it can get a little bit tricky, like you may be confused like how it works, but don't worry too much about how how it works. It's a lot of mathematics, but essentially to summarize, is you have a bunch of documents, you turn them into vectors, which are essentially numbers. The users ask a question, which then converts to a vector, which remember is a number. You then compare how close the user's vector is compared to the source of truth. If they're close to each other, the AI will return this specific vector, which remember is just a chunk of the document. So it retrieves that chunk, that document, back to the user by passing through a LLM GPT step so that it outputs a human-like text-based response to the user. So that's out of the way. Let's actually see about how we can go around and do it. So we actually go and use something called n8n. If you didn't know, n8n is an automation workflow platform that allows you to build these AI agents. So the first thing that you want to do is you actually want to upload it into the knowledge base, right? So we want to upload this document, this Nexus core platform document, into a knowledge base, which is basically this step, right? So the way that we do that is, first of all, we need to actually download this document. And because this Word document is already in my Google Drive, all we need to do is to just click open a Google Drive module, and you would choose the download file options, which is this option, right? And which I've already done it, so I'm just going to delete it. Within the Google Drive download option, you just need to connect to your Google Drive account. Once you do, which you can just create using create a new credentials, and then you would need to actually connect to your Google Drive account. But after you've done that, you would then just need to select the correct operation, which is download, and download the appropriate file from your Google Drive account, which we have already done, and you can just test it by clicking test that. As you can see, it returns data, and you can see that it's the file size and it's in the file format of a document, right? A Word document. Cool. Now the next step is a little bit tricky, which we are going to upload the entire thing into the document into a knowledge base. Now there are so many different ways to do it into a vector database, which corresponds to here is to create the embedding, create the vector, and then store it into a database. This is exactly what we're doing. So there are different vector-based databases you can consider. There's Superbase, there is Qdrons, there's a bunch of different options. But for now, let's just stick with something called Pinecone. If you haven't heard of it before, don't worry. Literally just go to pinecone.io and sign up. You're clicking this button. But for now, because I've already got an account, I'm just going to go ahead and click login. Once you're in, you would see that there are different pages. I've already created a previous index, which you wouldn't. So when you're new and you go to this Pinecone database, all you need to do is click on create index. And from here, you can just give the index a name. I'll just call this product because we're building the AI agent for the internal product team. Now, the configuration from here, you can choose different embedding models. Remember, embedding is just a term where we convert text to vector, which is numbers, a way to convert text to numbers. So there are different models in the market to do this. There's one by NVIDIA, one by Microsoft, there's one by Pinecone itself, there's one by OpenAI. We will just stick with the OpenAI one called Text Embedding 3 Small, the most cost-effective OpenAI embedding method. So it's the cheapest model to actually convert text to numbers or vectors. Now from here, you should choose on the 1536 dimension. Now don't worry too much about what that means. Like, it's basically just defining what dimension vector space you're in, because remember, we are converting text to vectors, and vectors, if you literally think of it like a 3D space, the world that we live in is 3D, right? So it will be a 3-dimensional vector space. But because we're converting the text to more complicated numbers, to more complicated vectors, so we usually need a higher dimension vector space. So imagine now it's 1000 dimensions, which is very hard to visualize. And now you would just need to click a cloud provider, which is, I would just stick with the Amazon one, and I would just stick with the Virginia region. After it's done, I'll just click on create index. And now you've created your first vector database. Congratulations. And now all you need to do is to go back to the n8n and use the upload KB to Pinecone module, which you can just search by typing the word Pinecone, and you can just drag this Pinecone vector store, and you'll just select the options of add documents to vector store. Once you're in, which I've already done, so I'm not actually gonna do it because I've already have an existing module, so I'm just gonna delete that. I'm just gonna delete this. And all you need to do once you're in is you just need to connect to your account. All you can do is you click on API keys, and you would just click on, you would just copy this API key. Now, if it's your first time, you will need to create an API key by clicking this button. Once you're done, you can go back to n8n and you click on create a new credentials and just paste in your API key here, and that will connect you to your own Pinecone account. Now, the operational mode, you shouldn't need to change anything. It should be insert documents. Now, it has a Pinecone index, which means that which index just means database, right? Which database should the n8n upload the documents to? Well, we've just created this index called product. So let's actually from the list here, I just need to choose product. Embedding batch size, don't worry too much what that means. It just means the number of documents to embed in a single batch. We only have one document, so you can just stay with 200. And now that's all done. And after that, you will just need to connect to your embedding model, which again should match the embedding that you use for the Pinecone, which remember, we've used text embedding 3 small, right? So we're just going to select that. And if that's your first time, well, you just need to create an OpenAI account by clicking on create a new credentials and pasting your API key from OpenAI. Now that's done, you then need to connect to a data loader. What a data loader does is, in the name, it loads the data into the Pinecone knowledge base. So you will just need to select what type of data is either JSON or binary. Remember, it is a document, right? Word document. But the Word document is in binary data, right? Not JSON. So you need to click on binary. And you will just need to select load all input data, right? And data format, it will just click on automatically detect by meme type. So it will automatically detect what data type it is, even though you know deep down it's a Word document. And that's it for the data loader. And from there, you just need to add in a text splitter. So what we've actually done from here is called recursive character text splitter. Now you don't need to worry too much about what it does. It's just a very default way to actually do this kind of chunking and embedding. Now for the chunk size, I'll just type in 1000 for this kind of, because this is a kind of small document. But actually, I'm going to go ahead and click on 3000 because it's actually 2000 because it's a medium size. I would say it's a medium sized document. And the chunk overlap, you often want to go with around 10%, so it's around 200. Now, what chunk overlap means is that, well, remember from here, The chunking is you have a bunch of documents, you take one section, let's say intro, and you have another section called product knowledge, for example. That's two chunks, right? That's two separate chunks. But remember, it's not exactly true because the chunking is not exactly by dividing it by section, but by the number of tokens, right? And think of it tokens just like the number of characters, which is not exactly true, but think of it like the number of words. Now, we've selected chunk size to be 2000. That means that every 2000 tokens in this document equals to one chunk. In a very, very high level, every 2000 words, that equals to one chunk. Now, obviously, that's not exactly true, but just stick with that logic for now. If every 2000 words or characters equals to one chunk, you can imagine that it could get cut off like halfway through a section. So let's say this is 1000 characters. That means that the first chunk will get cut off here, and the second chunk will go from here to here, right? But that's not exactly helpful because this first chunk, which is the introduction, is being cut halfway. That means that it will likely lose context by omitting the second half of this introduction section. So that's exactly why we need something called chunk overlap to allow us to preserve the structure and preserve the context of this specific document. So that's exactly why we have chunk overlap. And now, after you finish configuring the recursive character test splitter, we are ready to upload it into the knowledge base. And we just need to click test step. And it might take a while. Now you see it's successfully uploaded into the Pinecone knowledge base. Very nice. Now if we just go back to Pinecone and we click on product, and we just need to refresh this. Now as you can see, there are different chunks, right, being shown here, and these are the different chunks in this specific product document. So now you've done the upload the documents to the knowledge base. So what we've done so far is we have completed this part of the equation. Now let's actually attack it from the user's perspective. And to do this, we actually need to use the native AI agent node within n8n. So you would just type in the AI, and you would just click on AI agent. And the AI agent is basically a way within n8n to allow you to build this kind of different, agents, right? So an AI agent should be able to take a user's input and search the vector knowledge base that you've just configured, right? Search through this knowledge base, output a response based on these chunks to the user. So let's actually see how we do it. So within the product knowledge base, we just need to configure the prompt. The agent, you can write a prompt like "You're an Q&A and staff training chatbot for the Nexus Core product team. Your primary function is to provide accurate and relevant information about Nexus Core in response to internal team questions. Your core rules are always use the provided knowledge base to answer questions, do not make up information or speculate, prioritize clarity and conciseness, maintain a helpful and professional tone, identify knowledge gaps," right? So basically it's teaching the AI, you're writing this prompt to teach the agent what its role is, what it's trying to do, and what tasks the AI agent needs to do, which in this case is a staff training agent, right? So you analyze the user's question, perform a search of the Nexus Core knowledge base, which is through the Pinecone, extract the most pertinent information, and actually answers the user's questions, right? So this is kind of like the prompt, and it's connected to different tools. First of all, is the chat model. Within n8n, the chat model is the LLM model that underpins the entire agent. Think of it like the brain of this specific agent, which in this case, we're using the OpenAI GPT 4.1. Memory. Now, memory is important. Now, memory is important because memory essentially stores the conversational history that it has with the user. So from here, you can select the context window length, which is how many conversations you actually want to save. So how many past interactions the model receive as context. So 20, meaning that it will save the past 20 interactions the agent has with the user, and after that, it will start forgetting the first interaction that you have with the user. So it's just there to store the conversational memory. Now, the tool, which is what it's going to do, is the vector store, right? Because remember, we uploaded the documents into this Pinecone vector store previously, and now that we are using the agent to connect to this vector store that we just built, and we use this vector store to allow the agent to access this document, the chunking of the document, and use the chunks to actually generate a response to the user. So from here, we were just going to select the retrieve documents as tool for AI agent, and we're just going to put in a description. I'm just going to trigger this whenever the user asks a question about Nexus call. Yeah. And the embedding, remember the embedding is just the way that it turns text to vectors or numbers, and you would just use the text embedding 3 small, right, to match what we've been doing. And now we should be ready. So now let's actually test it out. And I'm just going to click on open chat. And from here, I'm going to move myself. And I'm actually going to type in the chat. So, hey, how are you? Oh, I forgot to actually match the key. The chat input. Hey, how are you? No prompt specified. The user message should match the chat input as well. I forgot to actually map it. So now, let's actually test it out. Hey, how are you? Now it's working. Yeah, remember to map the inputs whenever chat message received to the agent. Hello, I'm here to help you questions you have about Nexus code. How can I assist you today? Hey, so I'm very confused about the API endpoints. Can you walk me through it? Can you walk me through them? And now it's recalling the vector store, as you can see, and it's trying to actually answer the user's questions. Here's an overview of the main Nexus Core API endpoints organized CLI platform, right? Authentication and authorization services, and the user's authentication section management. You might not be able to see here, but let me just kind of make it bigger so you can see. So it actually generates a very good response. The authentications, different API endpoints, to notification services, analytics services, search engine, each services specific split of endpoints, right? And actually say that cited from Nexus Core Architecture Overview, Section 3, Key Features and Functionality Matrix. So he's citing where it gets this information from. So if we go back to the document and go back to the key features, right? See, as you can see the different API endpoints, right? That he's trying to retrieve, and all the different services, right? So this is exactly what the agent is good for, right? So imagine like you're a product team member, you're an internal team. Now this chatbot is extremely good for the team to kind of train or get quick information on this complicated product. So if I just ask them the question, what are some good questions to ask? What are the product management process the product management process is well designed. You've got the rollback management, you've got the grooming and refinement, feedback loops, go-to-market, value proposition, etc. Right? So it's basically referencing, as you can see, section 6.1, 6.2, etc. So you can see here, you've got the product management, backlog grooming, release management. Yeah. So it's exactly what the document's saying, but it's now chunking it like in a format more user friendly, so the team member can access that information wherever they want, right? And you can have just to kind of show you what's kind of going on behind the roof. It accesses the Pinecone vector store, right, and actually generate a response, as you can see here, by having this text here straight back to the user. So obviously this is just a kind of high level overview, but you can integrate this into WhatsApp, Instagram, Slack, channel, whatever you want, whatever your team is doing, so that you always have an instant agent that can answer the questions that your team member has about a very complicated specific product. Not even product, it could even be like a company SOP, it can be policies, procedures, etc. So product is just an example of this use case. So hopefully this helps, and yeah, let me know if you've got any questions, and if you want to build something similar to this for your business, feel free to book a call with the link in the description. Happy to walk it over what are the other use cases that something like this can build for your team. Have a good one.